The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Cult for the Culture podcast are solely those of the individuals involved. The content presented is not a substitute for seeking or seeing a licensed mental health professional.
Know what's up next, know what's up next. Healthy pleasure with it, coping for the culture. Better tune in, better tune in. Big sis, get 'em, big sis, get 'em. Coping for the culture, 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 cope.
Welcome to the Cult for the Culture podcast. I'm your host, Tiana Renee, the Culture's Advocate. On this show, we interview individuals from different walks of life who are dedicated to being the change within the culture as it relates to various topics and their effect on the world of mental health. Today's show is about mental health and incarceration, and I have a special guest today that I would like to welcome to the show. Welcome, LJ Flintall, to the Cult for the Culture podcast.
All right, glad to be here. Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you, of course, but for the audience's sake.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm born and raised Burlington, North Carolina. Grew up there playing sports, excelled in athletics, experienced a lot of behavioral health problems and issues growing up as a youth. I had a mental health diagnosis, but given the stigma that was attached to mental health and behavioral health in the Black community at the time, we chose to ignore it, not address it.
Right.
And later on in life, it caught up with me. But now today, I'm using that experience to advocate for youth, transition age youth, youth between ages of 14 and 26, where I can just help them overcome obstacles that may be in their way. I'm a program director at a nonprofit in Burlington called North Carolina Families United.
Okay, good. So before we get started, I always like to start the show off with self-care. So share the audience your favorite self-care practice currently.
Man, my favorite self-care practice. I have a few. I have quite a few. So to narrow it down to just one, I'd have to say me time.
Okay.
Literally just taking some time to myself, which I'll explain later on. We'll kind of dive into later. There's a specific day throughout the year that I'm extreme with it. But yeah, just taking some me time, doing things that I feel like doing that day, wherever the wind blows me, whatever my spirit's telling me to do, just moving around and enjoying me.
I'm going to ask because I'm curious. Literally only one day a year or?
No. One day in specific where I'm extreme. But it's
okay.
And it happens to be the day that I was released from being incarcerated. It's like a second birthday to me. So,
and that's worth having a day to yourself. Okay, so the topic today, like I said earlier, you guys, is mental health and incarceration. And I wanted to talk about this specifically because I know it's something that is very heavy right now in our culture, especially as it relates to our Black males. That can be young, old, whatever the case may be. And so I really wanted the opportunity to be able to talk about it, one, from a mental health perspective, but also two, just from lived experience and how that works. So you gave a little bit about your story, but what is your experience kind of with?
Yeah, I have no problem sharing it. It took a while to get to this point. I'm now at a point where if my lived experience and my sacrifice and struggle for a brief period of time can save someone a lifetime of heartache, I'm all for it. So yeah, I've kind of opened up a little bit about that lately. As of late, for starters, like I said, as I mentioned earlier, there were some behavioral health issues. They were prevalent and they were obvious early on. Choosing to ignore them, and like you said, just lack of self-care, lack of mental health awareness in the Black community led to for me to have to transition through the justice system. I guess the rundown was simply, like I said, it was young Black male athlete. Like I said, fairly talented. Not to toot my own horn.
You were talented, yes.
So state champ in 3 different sports, all-state athlete in football, scholarships from some of the biggest universities in this region. One incident after another, one behavioral outburst after another led to people kind of, they would pay attention to it, but they turn a blind eye. As long as you could score another touchdown, score another basket, win another race, it's all kind of swept under the rug. So growing up, there were fights, outlashes at teachers, fights in the community, involvement just in the streets of in the streets where we're having some sort of gang wars in a sense, riots in our schools, things like that. So those things, all the while, there'd always be, he's just around the wrong people. Maybe he's not being influenced in a positive manner. I had plenty of positive male figures and role models all throughout my community. And like I said, I had to, as I got older, one day I had to sit down with my mom and say, hey, it's your baby. He's the bad role model. Okay, he's the bad influence.
Wow.
So that alone, that self accountability and responsibility really allowed me to get a grips on my behavioral health issues and move forward, just addressing them. So again, just to get back to the story and not to get too far off topic, I got into undergrad. I'm at Wake Forest University on a full grant and aid football scholarship. But again, I'm not fitting in. I went to a Title I high school, predominantly Black. Again, like I said, I could count the white people on my hand that I graduated with, my fingers.
Okay.
So when I get there, it's a huge culture shock.
Yeah,
At the time, it was $40,000+ a year to attend and tuition. I'm not fitting in with these kids, So one thing after another, I'm bored, no one to party with. We were leaving campus going to Winston-Salem State, but I would lash out in other ways. So in my boredom, some nights I found myself, I'm shooting paintball guns off the top of my dorms, hit a kid in the neck. That's the first strike, So it's like, but we'll put them on social probation or something, right? You come back. I had an argument with the teacher where I cursed in an English class. She kicked me out of the class, forced me to take an F. It's like, small things that seem small, but they're making a big deal over time. And finally, was caught up in a ring where some friends and I were going around and breaking in people's dorms and robbing them. It got to a point, man, the university found out about that. They looked, this has gone a little too far. You got to go. So I was suspended from school, but I lost my scholarship. So I was looking for my next opportunity. Again, as long as you can run fast and jump high, there's typically, especially within institutions of higher learning, how they prey on the young Black males. So it's like, hey, if you can perform, we got an opportunity for you. We're not going to address your issues here that you seem to have.
But we're going to use you for what we can use you for.
But yes, exactly. And that's revenue.
Yeah.
So moving forward, I attended a junior college in Kansas, which Kansas is a hotbed for junior college football.
Yeah.
Some of the best in the country. I don't know, the Last Chance U,
I watched that
documentary that was held in Kansas. So excelled out there, earned a few other scholarships. I ended up going to Ohio University where I finished off my
because that's
bachelor's
where I remember.
Degree. Absolutely. So I ended up right now a bunch of pending charges, but no convictions. I was able to go there, participate in football, join the frat where I pledged Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And like I said, which afforded me some really great relationships and connections, extended my network that would later turn out to help me overcome the obstacles that I had placed in my own way. So so moving forward, I was coming home for an internship that summer and decided to make one final bad decision. So while I'm home for the internship, we decided to, we were involved in some narcotics activity, decided to participate in the sale of some illegal narcotics, but we had a plan to where we would double back on some college students. We would sell to them, but double back on them and rob them.
Okay.
So, and then participating in engaging in an illegal activity with someone, you don't expect for them to call the police on you. Things went left.
So it went completely bad.
Yeah, so they ended up, this is a complete cluster. So they ended up filing a police report on us, but using my car as a description. Unbeknownst to me, because I'm back in Ohio now. I've completed the internship. I'm back in Ohio. I'm not thinking about it. I come home the following year after completing the coursework for that internship to finish one more internship that would lead to for graduation. Well, while I'm home, cops get behind me, run my tags. So that's how it happens, though. Next thing you know, I'm like, no big deal. We'll see what happens. It's a nonviolent crime. It's my first conviction. We'll see what happens. Basically, I get to court and my lawyer's like, hey, you're gonna have to go to prison. I'm like, what? Active sentence? I mean, I'm getting my degree. There's no way you're gonna send me to prison, right? And that kind of boils back into, like I said, which we'll talk about later, and we'll tackle later, is racism across institutions and systems that we kind of transition through.
Yeah.
So whether that be financial, whether that be educational, or legal systems, of course. So this is one of those situations where I don't think I would have been incarcerated or forced to serve an active sentence in the event that I didn't look the way I look.
Right.
It was, like I said, first offense, first actual conviction, and it was a nonviolent crime. So with that being said, I had to go. It was really no question behind it. Kissed my mama, gave everybody a hug, and said bye. And you remember that
remember
stage.
that.
So when I got there, not to ramble on too long, but while I'm incarcerated, I'm sitting in the cell and I made a decision. I just kind of sitting around thinking to yourself, because you got a lot of time on your hands, and I made a decision like, hey, this has to stop. It's gone a little too far. And so from that day forward, I made like a pledge to myself, a vow to myself that I would use my platform upon release to help any transitional age youth that I could dealing with behavioral health issues. So here we are.
Wow. So I've known LJ for quite some time, and this is actually the first time that I've heard the full story. I didn't realize it was to the magnitude of what it was. But out of all of that, I'm like, you're the exception to the rule.
Absolutely.
Because,
Absolutely.
a lot of our brothers go in and they come out, but they go right back in.
Absolutely. Recidivism is at an all-time high in the African-American
All-time
community.
high, yes.
Period. And throughout the reentry of our legal system. But it's designed to do that. So it's not happening on accident. I'll let you know. So I'll use, once again, my lived experience as an example. I was released from prison after serving 17 months on the state prison yard. I was released with 30 months parole with a $14,000 restitution to pay. So I got 30 minutes to pay back $14,000. Almost 3 years. So first of all, it's such a lengthy parole for someone who's already served an active sentence. And then not a violent crime. And again, 14 months. So I was facing 51 months, a mandatory active sentence of 51 months. I pled out to a lesser charge. And pleading out to a lesser charge, which is the active sentence of 17 months. You think it's no big deal. But when they put the restitution and the extra parole time on there, that's the revolving trap door. So it's not, so a lot of people talk about a revolving door. There's a revolving trap door throughout our legal system where it's designed for you to go back.
Because when you take a deal, because I know some people very close to me that have had, this experience, but when they're presented to you, it doesn't seem like it's the worst deal.
Absolutely.
Because they don't add in everything else. It's like,
Absolutely.
Oh, you accepted it, great. Now, this is sold separately. You also get this. And it's like, wait, that's not what I agreed to. But when you're in trouble and you're thinking, well, if I just take this, then I don't have to worry about that.
Absolutely. But not thinking about the repercussions, not thinking about how these charges will affect you later on down the line. Even some misdemeanors, how these will affect you later on. Literacy is something that can't be overlooked or not taught in the African American community because it affects us at such an alarming rate. So even today, we have so many youth who are making bad decisions but have no idea about the law, about the statutes of limitations and the sentencing guidelines.
Don't. The average person does not know
that. And
we
can't afford to be as informed as the average person because we don't deal with the same obstacles as the average person. So, like I said, in reference to myself, as a convicted felon, there are no jobs out here that can afford you enough, that can pay you enough to pay back a $14,000 restitution.
No.
So again, and I'm not proud of the things that I've done to pay that restitution, but it got paid and I'm free. And so again, I to this day, I give myself a hard time for regressing in terms of my transition and trying to, and just to make ends meet so that restitution can remain paid and I can remain free.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it was a by any means necessary type of situation. So yeah.
$14,000 is a lot of money.
But no, to pay in 2 years and as a convicted felon with no means to do so.
Right.
So my first job, this is a humbling experience to even talk about this. My first job after incarceration was at a truck wash. It's washing 18-wheelers. This is a guy, he's an internship away from acquiring his bachelor's degree. He already has an associate's degree, and he's washing 18-wheelers for $7.50 an hour. After paying my restitution that month, I was living with my parents, stayed on a couple of couches too. I paid my restitution for the month, and I had to pack sandwiches to go to work, so I could have something to eat, so I could afford something to eat. It wasn't an overnight thing. Again, packing those sandwiches will turn you into somebody you don't want to be. Going to prison alone will turn you into somebody you don't want to be for survival purposes alone. But outside of that, coming home and packing those sandwiches, you decide to make some decisions that you otherwise wouldn't have made. And again,
you're trying to survive.
Just trying to survive. So, and I don't think that a lot of people understand that, and even within our own community, the elitist of the black community, the bachelor's degrees, the master's degrees, and so forth, the well-to-dos, we don't think about why some of our brothers and sisters are out here making the decisions they're making, but it's out of desperateness. They just really don't have another option in a sense, or at least in terms of their own mind, they can't really think it out because they can only think what they've seen. So, yeah.
So, I've heard you say a lot of different things, but
I'm all over the place right now.
But you're telling your story, and there are a lot of important pieces in that. But one of the things I heard was like the transition time and what that felt like for you.
Absolutely.
Because I know we talked outside of this, and I did work in grad school where one of the projects I worked on was recidivism, especially in our community. Absolutely. And how that affects. And one of the things that we know is when you get out, there is no real plan. Like, it's just like, all right, the gate's open, go ahead, do your thing. So what was that like trying to figure it out?
So for starters, for the past 17 months or 5 years, however long you've been incarcerated, you've been told what time to eat, what time to sleep, what time you can play basketball, what time you can work out, what time you can literally, what time you can write letters.
Wow.
It gets pretty extreme. So in reference to once you're released, who's going to tell me what time to do all of these things? This is everyday life that we're talking about. What time do I do this? What time do I go to sleep? What time do I wake up? So you've grown accustomed to someone always telling you. So that in itself is a transition. But given the network and the network of friends and the resources that I had available to me due to my, just to my travels across the world and the country and things like that, I had resources, but the average person being released from incarceration, they just don't have it. So even for myself, it was a challenge. So I can't imagine what the average person is going through. I couldn't even begin to tell you that's a mountain that you just can't, it's almost impossible to climb.
Right.
So getting back to things, I searched for transitional programs that would assist me, and I found none.
Nothing.
Yeah, I found none that were adequate or that to accommodate me in terms of what I needed. Absolutely not. So again, even with the mental health diagnosis, I reached out to vocational rehab. These are things that, and a lot of and just to kind of backpedal a little bit, I underwent a brand new psychological evaluation, expressed that to the courts and the judge, the district attorney, to no avail. It was absolutely it was disregarded completely. They said, hey, this played no role in your decision making. I'm like, how not?
So somebody very close to me, and I went to the case, and it was the similar situation. Well, this is the childhood. This is what happened. These are the things that led up to it. And it was like, no, I'm going to make an example out of you because you got to learn. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And I get it. It's not to excuse.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But let's take into account all of the mitigating factors that played a part in this action taking place. The make an example thing out of you, I felt that. I felt the target on me when it happened, given that my infraction, my crime took place in a predominantly white section of the city. I knew that played a role in me serving an active sentence, in a sense where I know that me being sentenced to prison wasn't meant for my rehabilitation, and it wasn't rehabilitative. If anything, I felt angry when I came home, especially with no resources,
right?
Especially being forced to work a minimum wage job. So moving forward from there, I continued to reach out, knock on doors. Doors were shut in my face. Continued knocking, going door to door, just trying to figure out, calling friends and family that could possibly have a resource for me here and there, a hand up of some sort. And I landed at North Carolina Families United doing an internship. I needed the internship to complete my bachelor's degree, so it fit perfect.
You
and
never
it was a paid
finished.
opportunity. Absolutely. So that was it. I was incarcerated before I could finish my bachelor's degree.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So I came home, worked the truck wash for maybe 3 to 4 months. That year in July, so that was 2014, I was able to land the internship and complete my bachelor's degree. So given that we're a nonprofit organization, 501c, there was no funding at the time for me to be brought on full time.
Okay.
So I had to take measures into my own hand, which I encourage all convicted felons or ex-offenders of some sort to dig within and try to find your entrepreneurial spirit, because nobody's gonna pay you what you deserve. As hard as you may work, you'll never be compensated for that. So because of the what we call the F on your report card.
Yeah.
So I encourage all people who have infractions with the law, when you're faced with an employment obstacle, just reach down inside and find your entrepreneurial spirit and find a way to earn your own income. So.
Yeah. So how easy and or hard was it for you? Because I realized that when you come, just being a therapist, and this is not doing therapy by any means, but certain things can be considered traumatic, right?
Absolutely.
And going to prison, I can imagine is something just based off the people that I've been around and seen, that who you go in as and who you come out as is two separate people. And it makes me, which I asked you about before, think about the Khalif Browder story.
Absolutely.
And how, everybody isn't afforded the opportunity and the toll that it takes on their psyche.
Yes.
To come out into a world where it's like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, again, I was fortunate enough, I guess, in reference to what I was gonna experience. I was fortunate to grow up in a neighborhood where it was an aggressive behavior amongst males demonstrated in my neighborhood on a regular. In a sense, had conditioned me for what I was gonna encounter and experience. But nothing, absolutely nothing could prepare you enough for what you're gonna see when you enter into that fence. It's like, so when you go into those gates and it shuts behind you, I slept beside murderers.
You're part of a different culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had to turn into a different person just to survive. So there are certain things you could not tolerate. There were certain examples that you had to make an example out of someone if you didn't want to constantly be picked on, picked with, If you wanted to, it's simple things, as simple as eating your food and having your own food. You had to show that you had to display this amount of masculinity to remain respected in that environment. And looking back, some of those things were inhumane. Some of the things that I witnessed, some of the things that I had to do on my own account. But looking back, like I said, I know for a fact it played a role in my psyche and again, it kind of forced me in a sense, which I think is the universe's way of doing things at times. It forced me to address my mental health and behavioral health issues that had lingered long before. So
yeah. So how did you manage, like, when you got out? Of course, you were trying to figure out the job piece and doing all of that, but how did you manage as far as reconditioning your mind and what that looked like, and being around people and being on your own schedule? And
it was a trial and error situation. Like there were some moments where I failed miserably. Yeah. But it was one of those things where, if you had to ask me, I know it's not the same for everyone, but personally, I think that it's a matter of having compassionate individuals around you, surrounding yourself with compassionate and empathetic individuals.
All about compassion and
absolutely,
empathy.
And just people who understand what it is that that you're going through, and actually helping connect you with resources to better yourself. I was fortunate enough, like I said, to have multiple D9 friends of some sort that would connect. They were able to connect me with therapists, with programs and things of that nature. That was my first time seeing a therapist since I was maybe 14 or 15 years old. So my first time seeing a therapist was at 24,
14 and 24 is a big difference.
Yeah, that's a big difference. I'm not a boy anymore. I'm a man now.
And I have a lot of experience.
A lot of things that I wish I didn't see. And so being connected to a therapist, focusing on using some natural supports and coping skills, and also some medication management that needed to take place. So that needed to take place decades ago, but it was finally taking place. So and it took place. Given that I was an adult, I was able to speak up for myself and advocate for myself in a way that, hey, this isn't working for me. This is working for me. I'd like to try this, and I think that helps me today as I advocate for other youth that I facilitate our Renew Wraparound program with.
So, and I feel like I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna pose it anyway for the sake of conversation.
Absolutely, I'm all for it.
You mentioned earlier about, because the way that you look, you received a sentence that wasn't as fair.
Absolutely.
And it makes me think about, I cannot remember this boy's name, but I think he was a swimmer. He was an athlete.
Absolutely.
A white male athlete accused of sexual assault.
Yes. At Stanford University, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his...
Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I think it was Stanford.
Somewhere.
And was it a rape? A sexual assault of some sort?
And he kind of got he's a star athlete. Yeah, jail time would ruin this for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And because of, I think they used his clean background or something for their discretion in terms of the discretionary protocols and procedures in the sentencing. To say that's unfair would be an understatement.
Very much so understatement.
But we talk about it. I mentioned it earlier. Racism is so deeply embedded in our institutions, in our systems that we transition through.
Right.
That it's a matter of whether did you not get the job, employment, did you not get the loan, account, finance, so it's like you didn't get approved for a loan. You mean you with the
right.
You got a decent credit score? No, they didn't approve me. So and I've experienced that since, and I don't know if it was my criminal background or what, but I've actually had experiences where trying to buy, this has made my life more difficult in more ways than one. So not just obtaining employment, but getting financing an auto loan, getting an apartment in my name, like these things. So again, these are.
But how? Because it's like, I know it's credit check, but is this background check?
Background checks take place in some jobs, some careers do background checks.
I know, yeah.
But I mean, they do credit checks, and which my credit score plummeted while I was incarcerated.
Okay.
So you're like, hey, what bills can I pay from in here?
You can't.
And there's no hardships really for you. You make a call and say, people always say, oh, you were incarcerated. That was because of actions on your own. So no, we're not going to grant you a hardship. And you're like, but how could I have possibly made payments from in here?
Right.
So that's been a process itself. And again, thanks to the resources and in my network, of family and friends that I have, I was able to overcome these obstacles.
Yeah, you were
these supports are
blessed.
These supports are not in place for a lot of ex-offenders. And it's like, so what do? Do we leave these people to kind of,
fend for themselves?
Newsflash, they're not going to make it, But it's important that we lift as we climb, because in terms of desperation, they're our neighbors. So if they're our neighbors and they're desperate and we're living fine, what happens? You know,
Right.
what happens there? Well, you know, eventually it's like first class or coach class. You're all dead if the plane crashed. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
I've heard that analogy before, and it was like, man, if that's
I've
all
never
the,
heard that. That's a good analogy,
it's
though.
all the more reason that, hey, like, you know, your neighbor's gonna break into your home if you're doing well and you're not helping them, you know, and they're struggling. So out of desperation. So again, like I said, I think I'm very fortunate. I'm blessed for, like you said, for being, you know, afforded the network that I have, which I give myself credit for that. I don't want to blame, you know, I don't want to give anyone else credit for the friends for these relationships that I afforded, you know, that I had forged. I've always I felt like I've had great values, morals, and principles. So it's like, hey, I think if anything, that may be a testament to how good of a person I truly am on the inside, as opposed to this mistake that I made, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Because I mean, we all have a journey.
Absolutely.
And we all make decisions that we are not proud of. And I get that piece. And the more that we talk about it, and I know we've talked a lot about your experience, but I'm thinking about the experience for some of our boys who aren't afforded that. And it makes me think of the 13th Amendment documentary.
Yes.
And I knew about, you know, institutional and structural racism, all
Absolutely.
that I knew, but like just watching the documentary and hearing it laid out, and
it's eye-opening when you get it that way. You're right.
Especially if you don't know all the like we know the amendments, we learned them in school, but after that, like, are we really thinking about them? No.
Application is key. Like, what are we applying?
We're not applying it to anything. Most of us aren't lawyers,
right?
So it doesn't matter to us. But when they break it down and you see where it's like, even within our legal system, it's still okay for this stuff to be on the book.
Absolutely. And just looking at the numbers alone, it's like, hey, like, well, we don't make up the majority of the population.
Not at all.
So why do we make up majority of the crimes that are being committed? Sometimes I've actually noticed that some of the figures and the numbers, I wish I had them in front of me right now. There were similarities in the numbers in terms of the crimes that were committed. But the sentencing guidelines, the sentencing was where the discrepancies took place. So yeah, you know, being sentenced to prison and being sentenced to probation, that plays a role in, you know, in how my life turns out. Because as I mentioned before, it's not therapeutic for me. It's not rehabilitative for me.
No.
I'm in here, you know, and I'm experiencing traumatic events daily. You know, and it's turning into physically fending for self, and you know, it's like I said again, it's like, you know, being told when I can do things. Not being able to walk outside of, you know, it's like, hey, that you know, the door is locked. You know, you can't leave if you wanted to, you know. So
fresh air is not a thing.
That plays a role in your psyche. And I think that, you know, what's required for us to overcome, which I don't know if you were ever going to ask this question, I just wanted to get to it,
Go ahead.
was that for one, it's going to have to be literacy in terms of, you know, legal literacy. We're going to have to know the law.
Ooh.
In terms of just making mistakes, that's going to happen. We know that. I mean,
it's a part of growing and
it's a
living
part of
in
growth.
life.
Your frontal lobe, which, you know, used for your decision making, it's not fully developed until you're 25 anyway. So
25. Let's repeat that. 25
years old.
Most people do not know that.
Which is why the National Institute of Health and the World Health Organization identifies transition age youth that I work with
into that age.
Up until 25. Now, unfortunately, we're just now getting kind of, in terms of juvenile justice, this year with the raise the age in North Carolina. I think we're one of the last people to do this, but we're changing the age from 16 to 17 and 18, where 17 and 18-year-olds with nonviolent offenses can be charged as juveniles. So,
which is a big difference, because up until this point, for years,
16 years old,
16, you were tried as an adult, and now it's one thing to go to jail or prison as an adult. Right? But as a baby, where you are still trying to figure yourself out, and I think that's what broke my heart the most about Khalif. Like, he looks older, but he's not. He was 16 years old when he went in, and having to navigate this over something that he didn't even do. That's first things first.
Right.
And a lot of the times we do hear stories where people go to jail for something that they never even did.
And unfortunately, unbeknownst to a lot of us, what the 13th documentary we did was it shed a light on the bond system. Like, you know, being bonded out of prison, out of jail, out of the county jail when you're awaiting trial or you know, things of that nature. The people with the money are able to bond out and fight their case from the outside, go on with their everyday life.
Right.
But if you don't have the money, innocent, guilty, or in between, whatever you may be, you would have to sit in there just simply because you don't have the means to bond yourself out.
Sometimes that can be years.
Absolutely. And there's different perspectives on this. On
the bond system?
Because some people aren't, you know, if it doesn't affect you, you won't look at it the same way.
Gotcha.
But I mean, clearly we think with common knowledge, absolutely, like, man, this is wrong. This is inhumane. It shouldn't happen. You know, it's kind of mind blowing and baffling as to how could you not? Some people don't look at it that way, you know? So it's, They say, hey, you did it, you know, or if you didn't do it, you shouldn't have been in the you know, you shouldn't have been in the situation where they thought you did it. Like, what?
Guilty by association.
You know, it's kind of like, so literally, like I said, mind blowing. But the price we pay to be Black, you know, it's like, it's risky, but I wouldn't, you know.
I wouldn't trade it for nothing.
I wouldn't trade it at all.
Yeah,
so no, I'm all for it. I'm here. And so, like I said, here we are, passing on that knowledge. Also, like I said, reverting back to what I said, what do we need to overcome? Outside of literacy of the law, we'd also need to, we need more programs in place, like the one that I was
going to ask you about that. What did you think about?
Well, more programs, more peer-to-peer support programs where people with lived experiences can pass along their experiences to youth before that, because we all know it's better to build strong men than you know, build strong boys than repair broken men. So with that, was that Frederick Douglass? I have no idea who said that. So I don't
heard it though.
But that quote goes a long way in saying that catch them at the most impressionable ages, as youth, as teenagers, as children, and formulate their minds and mold their minds to know that, hey, this isn't right. There is another way. And not just tell you there's another way, show you the other way. You know, so we'll hold your hand and walk you through this process of becoming an adult. Until we do that, until we put more plans in place like that, which connects them to natural supports and forces the Black community to address mental health. I
was gonna say that too, because a big piece of it is the mental health.
Absolutely. I'm acting this way. Not by accident.
No.
Yeah, not by accident.
It makes me think about, and I was just talking about this earlier, the ACEs study. You familiar with that?
Adverse childhood experiences?
Yes. And for those of you who don't know, the ACEs study is basically a study that they've done. There's a questionnaire.
Developed in Oakland, was it?
Can't remember.
It was in the Bay Area. I think it was developed in the Bay Area.
It's a questionnaire, basically asks you different things that you may have experienced in your childhood that most people probably won't consider trauma.
Absolutely.
But, you know, certain things are up there. And basically what the study came to is, depending on the number of adverse childhood experiences you had at the end, it kind of determines your risk factors for developing certain like life-threatening illnesses and death.
And behavioral
issues.
Absolutely.
And a poor quality of life. And I keep having this conversation with people, and I wish it could just be transmitted to the world and everybody would know. But what happens as a kid does not end when you turn 18.
Absolutely not.
Continues to go on, and it continues to play a role. And I know within our community and our culture, a lot of the time it's like ADHD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a thing.
Little black boy syndrome is what I call it.
What I've learned, you know, recently with doing more trauma work is that a lot of the times what we consider ADHD is actually trauma symptoms.
Absolutely.
And it manifests the same way. And so you treat it one way when really it should be treated this way.
And the way that you're treating it actually triggers it to become worse. It worsens it. Yeah. So no, I like I said, I'm actually a product of such. Like I said, the misdiagnosis among Black African American children.
Yes.
It does two things. A, it keeps that legal system in rotation economically. And two, it stops us from actually developing and addressing the issue properly, which leads to
figuring it out on your own.
Figuring it out on your own. So molding us into the individual is going to be. So in reference to that funding the prison system, there's a third thing it does actually. It economically fuels our pharmaceutical market. So with that being said, the more people that I could place this diagnosis on, the more medication we have to sell.
Yes.
And in terms of when medicating, if anything, should be a last resort, and we should resort to natural supports of some sort. I've actually sat in on some care reviews as an advocate for youth and families where a six-year-old African-American female was diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed medication for medication management by a general physician. Not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist of any sort, by a pediatrician.
When I tell you that is more prevalent than people even know, and because you're a doctor, you say,
no one questions it.
You have to know, but there's a difference between a physician and a psychiatrist.
Absolutely.
A psychiatrist is meant to prescribe psychotropic meds, which are just meds for mental health diagnosis. But it's not. It's nothing to go.
And they threaten us with, if you don't do this, we're going to kick your kid out of school. And unbeknownst to us as parents, as parents, like I said, in the African American community, we haven't been schooled on these things. We have no literacy in reference to these issues.
Do you know what they do now? They do now, which surprises me, is if you have behavior issues that are getting too extreme for the school, because sometimes it's just we don't want to manage it because we have all these other children.
Absolutely.
But I've had kids where it's like, you can't come back to school until you get an evaluation. so I can't get an education because I'm struggling with mental health. How does that work?
How is that conducive towards me becoming a better student? How do I learn at home with no professional?
Which makes me think about like
educators.
suspension, because even this is where it starts, is in school, because the suspension rates for us and our little black boys, little black girls, minority children, period, is way higher, and it sets you up to know, well, oh, if I don't want to go to school anyway, and I do X, Y, and Z, then I just don't have to go.
And as an adult, I'll go a step further for you, that as an adult, after you've been conditioned to think that way, I don't want to deal with the responsibilities, the real world responsibilities of life. I don't want to pay rent. I don't want to pay cell phone bill. I don't want to pay car insurance. You know where there's no car insurance bill? In prison. You know where there's no, you want to know where there's no rent? In prison.
Right.
You want to know where there's no, like you said, it's a prison school, it's a public school to prison pipeline that, like you said, it's been formulated a long time ago.
Yeah.
And again, nothing about it is conducive. It's gotten to a point where some kids are transitioning through the juvenile justice system through criminalized school-based offenses. Like, you mean you're gonna criminalize my non-compliance at school?
Yes.
And make me in the SRO files a police
student
report
resource.
on this.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
absolutely.
can get, for those of you who do not know, you can get legal charges within the school system for minor risk
non-compliance.
things. Non-compliance.
Yeah.
Like,
I've never, like
and
I said,
it could go against your record. But it's even like now, you talked about the raise the age, because I worked a lot on this too. There are like diversion programs that
Absolutely.
are supposed to help. But at the same time, it still places you in the same system.
It places me in the system, and these youth, quote unquote, youth development centers that that we have in place they're baby prisons. That's all they are. I've been inside them.
I have too. I've had to visit kids.
This looks like an adult prison. It's just for younger people here. And
they lock you in too. Like they come in, give me your phone, give me this. Okay, we're gonna close the door when you need us. Press this button, and it's like, well, Oh, okay.
Again, like I said, and there's a heads and beds mentality. Like these caseworkers are literally like I've seen it with my own eyes that I've seen a prison shut down because they weren't having enough. They weren't populating it enough.
Well, we need more of that.
Yeah, well, here's the thing: is that now what message that send when these 7 caseworkers at this prison are out of a job? They're like, hey, I gotta get people. I gotta get people in here, and I have to, and now I have to contribute to recidivism because that's job security for me.
Yeah,
heads and beds, and if that's a nursing home mentality, it shouldn't be And honestly, North Carolina still has private-owned state prisons. No one should benefit and profit off the incarceration of other individuals. Absolutely not. So again, like I said, reverting back to, it starts as a youth where we start addressing it in our schools, where we in our doctor's offices. And until we educate the parents, like I said, with more peer-to-peer support, parents with a lived experience of raising a youth with behavioral health and mental health challenges should be paired with parents who are undergoing it now, new parents who are now raising youth with these challenges, and now they can afford them their insight and their experiences to help them move forward after being properly trained, of course. But it just doesn't seem fair to have someone to learn it on their own, on the fly. It's like when I could literally learn from your mistakes as opposed to learning from my own mistakes. So I think that's also a saying, like what a wise man learns from his mistakes, an even wiser man learns from the mistakes of others. So these things go a long way. These proverbs go a long way, and if we just simply apply them to our everyday life in our community. So.
What are your thoughts on the likelihood? Like, you gave really good examples for like how we can fix it.
Absolutely.
But what are your thoughts on the likelihood of those things happening? And not to like put a downer, but like, what are the smaller things that we can do that you think would lead us up to this point? Because I would love for us to get to the point where it's not there.
Some of those things that I mentioned are definitely in terms of development, we're quite a bit away from those actions taking place. In the meantime, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't agree with these things taking place in large groups because people fall through the cracks.
Right.
I think a lot of small groups, each one reach one, each one teach one. Starting where you're at with what you have, and reaching out to small neighborhoods, as neighborhoods expanding to regions of your community, of your city, your town. And
people like you, because that's what you're doing currently.
Absolutely. So I guess, is that a chance for me to speak on that right now? I currently am I'm a nationally certified mental health juvenile justice trainer. And in my capacity as the program director at North Carolina Families United, I facilitate a evidence-based high fidelity wraparound program for transitioning youth. So youth transitioning through all systems, whether that be from middle school to high school, from high school to adulthood and college, from foster care back in, to back into society as into homes, out of the transitioning through the juvenile justice system, specifically through the juvenile justice system, because most of my referrals come from DJJ in the Cardinal catchment area of Caswell, Alamance, Person, and Orange and Chatham counties. But RENEW is an acronym titled Rehabilitation, Empowerment, Natural Supports, Education, and Work. Okay. It was developed at the University of New Hampshire's Institute on Disabilities in the 90s. Okay. Specifically,
so it's been around for a while.
Yeah, for a while. So, which it had to be in order to be considered "quote unquote" evidence-based.
Right,
so,
right.
We've, like I said, it's one of those things where it was designed for youth with behavioral health and mental health conditions that they're struggling with, and it's based on more so from a clinician standpoint, but more so just from a lived experience and a peer-to-peer support standpoint. So again, the trainings take place at the Institute of Disabilities in New Hampshire, and I flew up there, underwent this extensive training that took place over the course of 3 months, where I had to return 3 times. Right. It even consisted of me engaging with youth and doing some practice runs in a sense. Right. So now I've been a certified RENEW facilitator and trainer now for over a year. I've been a certified, thank you. So as what I'm using now, working with some of the youth that are transitioning through the juvenile justice system in my catchment area, I've had some extremely good results. So I haven't had one youth to regress in reference to behavior. We saw less suspensions. We saw an improvement in grades and my caseload, I have 8 youth on my caseload right now, in which all of them have experienced an improvement in their grades, and all of them have received less suspensions, and in relation to their past semesters, previous semesters. And I'm personally, I can speak and say that I've experienced better engagement with their families and their households. So, it's one of those things where I'm able to use the experiences that I unfortunately had to undergo, and pass them along and help these youth. And these youth respond better to me, given that I've been them. I've been in their shoes. I've been a troubled youth before. And so it's one of those things where a school administrator speaking to them, a therapist, a psychologist, some clinician of some sort speaking to them doesn't go quite as far, given that, hey, you've never been me before. You don't know what this is like. And I can actually sit down with them and honestly, with fidelity, say, hey, I've been you before. This is what you're going through right now. Expect this, and this is what you can do to alter the outcomes. And at first they're a bit reluctant because sometimes because I'm
new.
Exactly. And I'm coming in a professional setting. I'm not some guy, and so unfortunately it takes a little while, but after they buy in, which that typically happens after what I tell them turns out to be true. Right. They like I said, they respond extremely well. And
you have to think about it too, up until getting to you. Exactly. The amount of people that have probably tried to help or didn't really help, thinking that they were help, you gain that mistrust, and it's like, don't even worry about it. I don't. So
at first there are some barriers to break down. Yeah. But as thoroughly taught throughout the training, some concepts and some coping mechanisms to break down barriers and to establish a rapport and gain that familiarity, and it works. So again, like I said, I look forward to. I'm actually now the only certified RENEW trainer in North Carolina.
You better do it, LJ.
So through the System of Care Expansion Grant, we've been granted some funds to actually go around the state, which I'll start.
And that's what you need is money.
Absolutely. So at the beginning of the new fiscal year, starting in July, I'll be in Cherokee, and also in the eastern region in the western region, and also in the eastern region in Greenville and Wilmington, training other social workers and other juvenile probation officers and juvenile court counselors on RENEW, so that they can better work with youth in their areas. Yeah, absolutely.
That is so amazing. I commend you, because like I said, I've known LJ for a very long time, and you've always been a good person and a fun person and all that. But just to see us growing up and not being in college, and we were kids, not to be in that realm anymore, and just to your story put you in a situation where you're able to make a difference for other people and able to help other people out on the other side.
Absolutely.
And although it didn't feel good when you were in that place, and I know it's probably one of the hardest things that you ever had to face in your life, but now your story is your purpose, and now you're able to do that. And this is what we need within our culture. Absolutely. Is for when our boys get out, for them to have the resources so that they can turn around and help the next person. Absolutely. And that's how we start rehabilitating just our culture in general.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, I think the start is going to be, like I said, addressing mental health issues in the Black community, addressing trauma, not turning a blind eye to it.
Not sweeping it under the rug.
Absolutely, and removing the stigma that comes with it. Like, the stigma that's attached to mental health in the African American community is just such an ugly forefront. It
is.
And it peeps its head out.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Like, no,
nobody said you were
no
crazy.
one said so. It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Let's address this and help you get better, because mental health is just as essential as physical health, because
We talked. What's this us that talked about it? You can be physically healthy and still in your mind not be mentally healthy and not be phically healthy now.
You want an example of Division I athlete who can't seem to stay out of trouble. So so no, again, like there's a battle going on within you. There's two wolves. I saw, and I say this all the time to some of the youth that I'm working with. I'm like, you know which wolf is going to win? The one you feed. The wolf you feed is the one that's going to win in that battle within you, and that's going to determine your outcomes and your behaviors. So again, I'm out here, like I said, just trying to give back where I've taken away, especially in reference to my own community where I've taken away, and trying to just feed the good wolf. That's me.
You're doing it though. To be on like the level that you are now within the state systems is something complete. That's a different ball game.
Absolutely.
And to be up there and be able to, like, you're the trainer here in North Carolina.
And it was met with some, with
of course,
with some backlash, with some I guess what's the reluctancy. A lot of people didn't really want me in the room a lot of times. Absolutely. Say, hey, he's still who he was, and it's like, well, if you truly believe that, if you truly believe in the system of care principles that then give me.
That's not your perspective.
That's not your perspective. It can't be. So again, I'm fortunate. I'm blessed. So I look forward to passing it along and having more of more lived experiences at the table where they can provide their experiences and their voice like I said, and providing a platform where we can let adults who are decision makers in North Carolina, letting them know what it is these transition age youth need to overcome obstacles, to sustain, and just to acquire success and to sustain success that they've already had. So that takes us a long way.
This would usually be the portion of the show that I say that I call Let's Advocate, but you've done a very good job already, like telling me how we can change our culture as it relates to mental health and making it more normalized and not an issue of you being crazy, because mental health does not mean crazy.
Absolutely not.
So I really appreciate you for being open and transparent. I realize that this can be something that's difficult to talk about, but I really think that it can be something that can touch a lot of people and make it known that even if you have that experience, you can live beyond that. And that's powerful to me.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate you for coming on. I feel like this was a very good conversation. Gave me a lot of emotions because, like I said, I have people very close to me who have had this experience, and so I know what goes into it.
If you're an African American, it's very likely that you will
at some point in your life.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, whether you want to or not, accident, decision making, whatever the case may be. So I really appreciate you for that. And I would love to have you on again for something else. I don't even care what it is, but we'll figure it out. If
you don't mind, may I plug one more thing?
Plug yourself. Let people know what you're doing.
Yeah, so no, I'm a co-adult advisor for a nationwide youth advocacy and youth empowerment group titled Youth Move.
Okay.
So Youth Move is an acronym as well, stands for Motivating Others Through Voicing Our Experience. So I'm the co-advisor for the statewide chapter of Youth Move. And again, it's giving youth a platform to voice their opinions, let adults know what it is they need. Also, it gives youth a chance to be in that safe place and discuss mental health and behavioral health without being judged, without that stigma, and also advocating for policy change. Again, so that's
where it starts for real.
Absolutely, because until the laws change, until the rules change, you having a different perspective is just kind of your 2 cents at the end.
Right, we're playing the same game.
Again, so working with these youth move is youth led. It's just adult advised. So we completely rely on the youth to make decisions, even if it's a decision that we don't think is going to be the best outcome.
Right.
And what we come to find out is that these methods stick a little longer. So the youth are now more motivated, more self-motivated, more engaged. And what we've also come to find out is that we don't know everything. So sometimes that method that we thought was going to work better, it turned out that we were wrong. So working with youth, you can support any of those initiatives by just doing so in your community, referring youth to these to that organization,
Yeah.
to Youth Move.
Because it's not just in North Carolina,
No,
right?
no, Youth Move is nationwide. There's about 30 chapters across the nation, statewide chapters, and we have local chapters across the state that we provide technical assistance to. So right now we have 9 local chapters across the state.
Is there a website for people who?
Absolutely, youthmove.org. Youthmove.org, and NorthCarolinaFamiliesUnited.org is our actual company. Is the company that I work for, and supporting those causes, supporting youth in any capacity. Whether it be because we hold leadership training activities every year, annual leadership training where food is paid for, lodging is paid for, and it's up to 30 youth on our website at NorthCarolinaFamiliesUnited.org. You can go to the statewide chapter Youth Move NC, Youth Move North Carolina website, and for there you can register for our leadership series that takes place in June. We hold 6 like mini trainings for youth to make them more aware. Inform them and help them acquire skill sets that they'll need to become better advocates for themselves and for their peers. So those and just to kind of like wrap it up, some of those trainings consist of mental health first aid, an intro to mental health first aid, conflict resolution, team building, peer-to-peer support, cultural competency and LGBTQ awareness, and an intro to RAP, wellness recovery action planning. So
all the things we should probably be learning in school.
Absolutely, but unfortunate to us, so. And
we need to advocate for that.
Yeah, we should. I think that's something especially in reference to the school-based mental health initiatives that are taking place regionally. I'll also be participating in their regional meetings, facilitating some presentations there in the upcoming months. And I think that was a good idea, T. I'm glad you said that.
No,
because
for real though.
I never thought.
Because we learn all this stuff that we don't use. I've never used geometry outside of school.
No, and even in my own capacity, we're facilitating this training with our organization, but I've never thought to advocate for these trainings to be in our own schools. I think that's actually gonna be my next initiative, and I'll make sure I'm gonna cite my sources. I'm gonna be like, hey, TT did
tell
this.
Tell them I said it.
But
what I've learned through working with kids, because at one point I was doing in-home based services, so I was going to the schools, I was doing all of that, and one common thing that I found is the teachers don't have enough training within mental health and what that looks like and how it manifests in children, and so they just chop it up to this is a bad kid.
Yes, absolutely.
And they get frustrated and they deal with them on that basis, and then it becomes suspend them because we can get them out.
But expel them. So now I don't have to deal with them at all for the rest of the year.
Homebound. Send them to the alternative school, which we all know is a breeding ground for all types of things.
Absolutely. But just so we're clear, I don't know, just something you did right now. Let's roll reversal for a minute. You kind of sparked the question to me that I want to propose to you.
Propose it.
So outside of, again, I gave you the trainings that we provide at Families United with youth through Youth Move. I also would like to know, how do you feel about other trainings? Because you said things that we don't learn in school that we should. Yeah. I'm going to throw a few out there. Let me know what you think about them, okay? Because these are some things that have kind of been running through my mind. And I think that the Black community, the mental health community in general needs to know this. Because our youth who are struggling with behavioral health and mental health diagnosis, often when I cross their paths, these are things they don't know. When I cross the paths of adults, these are things they aren't informed of. So, all right, so here we go.
Go ahead.
Financial literacy.
Absolutely.
Taxes, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Credit building.
How to save money, how to buy a house.
Yeah, budgeting, things of that nature,
How to apply for a job.
Yeah, okay, all like, so resume building and things like that, interviewing skills. I never see that, right?
We don't.
So moving forward, so we got financial literacy, that's one, right? So so clearly I can tell by your response, this is something you're
I'm ready for it, yep.
Okay, but now the last question is, so it's also gonna be, cultural competency.
Oh no, I am the biggest advocate for cultural competency.
Got you.
Because there are so many clinicians that I have come across that only see from their lens, or teachers that only see from their lens. And if you're not able to step outside of yourself to see that other people have different experiences and other cultures operate different than your own, then you are never going to reach the people that you're trying to reach if they are outside your race or outside your culture. So I'm always an advocate for that. And I feel like if we at least start with the babies, then this is something that you've known from the beginning.
But how? That's my question. That's my last question. How? How do we implement financial literacy and cultural competency? Education reform.
Education reform.
Absolutely.
We need to go to the meetings. We need to make friends with policymakers.
Absolutely.
These are the things that we're not.
Absolutely.
Most of us aren't willing to do because it's a lot of work, but these are the things that need to be done. And I think that's how it's done.
Huh? It's like, for free. There's no instant gratification in that. I get it. So
advocation is free.
Yeah,
100% free.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's where we all got lives that we're trying to live. We're all trying to, like, hey, raise our babies. We're trying to go to school and get that second and third and fourth degree.
Live
trying
your
to
dream.
get studying for this state board exam and things like that. And it's like, but what are we gonna do about? Yeah. What,
The people behind us.
yeah.
Oh, don't care about them. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry about them. It'll be okay, right?
Yep.
These are the people that are gonna take care of us. No, so I agree completely. So education reform, which takes an awful lot of work, but
Yep.
again, even the people that are listening right now, you know, hey, take these matters into your own hands.
Yes. This is what I say all the time. It takes one person to start a conversation.
Yep.
And even if when you initially started, you don't reach somebody, you keep going and you go until you find somebody else that connects with you and you keep going from that. And that's where we start. Like all of these laws didn't just come out of the sky. Like it came with people sitting together and coming to a common understanding and say, hey, this is what we all agree on and this is what we're going to do. That's my perspective.
That's your perspective. I like that. I like that. It did come about that way. But I think they were set up in like to behave. This is how we all feel, and this will be set up to our best interest. So like, I guess so. I think it's going to take advocacy and policy change, like you said, to overturn the wrongs that were put in place before.
Because like we talked about earlier, there's still a lot of missing or secret laws and amendments in there that we don't know about.
Underlying that are preventing us from truly reaching our fullest potential.
Yep,
absolutely.
That was a good question.
Yeah, and no, like I said, you sparked it though. Like I said, the whole time it's been with them, but somebody had to bring it out. So
yep. Well, I think that makes our show, huh?
Yeah. Like I said, I think it was a good one.
Yeah, I do too. Right. Well, as always, y'all, thank you for tuning in to the Cult for the Culture podcast. I will catch you guys next time. Bye, y'all. For more information about the show, events, or if you have any questions, you can find us on Instagram at Healthy Pleasures Inc. and visit us at www.healthypleasuresinc.org.